welcome to another Crucible tutorial. Today we'll be doing another replay with the Tau, this one going for the Crute as my build order. So why Crute? Well, my opponent is Space Marines, and Space Marines, if you go for Monka, there are a few issues. First of all, if they go for Assault Marines, I'll have a difficult time dealing with them. They are faster than me, all of my infantry, and they can tie up most of my ranged infantry and kill them pretty quickly due to my squishiness. Even if not, I'll have trouble dealing with their TAC Marines, especially if they have grenades, just due to how tanky they are, where they'll be able to kill my units as well without getting tied up. So in general, Crute are a safer choice versus Space Marines due to the fact that they can trade well with Assault Marines and keep up with them, and they can tie up the ranged TACs. I'm going for stealth suits because I'm not planning to use these guys as part of the combat force. The combat force will be Crute, and I want the faster capping on the listening post compared to Guavessa. So again, the build order is builder, 2 cappers, 1 builder, 1 capper. Oh, and also taking up less population cap is also useful. So this is standard stuff. As soon as my Crute Shaping Center finishes, Crute Shapers are the first unit. These are amazing early game units. They can trade with Assault Marines, they can beat a squad of TACs, and if the enemy decides to go for a commander, they can also deal with that commander. So very versatile unit, hence the reason, it's the main reason to go for Crute early. So, as you can see, as soon as they come out, I immediately send them to the enemy and I'm able to stop them from capping a listening post. As with the other guides, this was played versus harder AI. As you can see, a single unit is causing a lot of chaos, especially with how fast they are because of the 2 abilities they have, where they have Hunt to knock down enemy units, and they also have their Run. So, now that there's too many units here to fight, I back off with them as I continue to build up at home. So so if you go for Monka, you can kind of go for the Tau barracks and ignore the Crute Center for a long while. If you're going for Kauyon, you start with a Crute Center, yes, but you do want to get the Tau barracks earlier just because you want some ranged units. You don't want to completely rely on Crute. So as you can see, these guys are absolutely demolishing the Assault Marines. They're constantly trying to retreat. As the stealth suits are kind of playing ring around the rosy with the Space Marine forces, and because I was able to force them off this listening post early, I was able to capture it and capture it for myself. If I went for Monka, this would not be possible because any of my other units are much slower than the Crute Shapers and could not create as much space in order for me to be able to cap. I'm getting mines because I'm expecting this side to get attacked, and also getting more generators. And there we go. As soon as I get the power, going up to tier 1. There is no reason for Tau to really stay long in tier 0, so tier 1 is always a good idea. Versus Space Marines, I'll primarily be going for Pathfinders because their rail rifles are especially good versus heavy infantry, and their slow is good versus Space Marines as well. And I also go for some breachers to shoot at the Assault Marines in close range and deal with any buildings during a push. So, yeah. Despite starting with the Crute Shaping Center, you do not necessarily want to just go for a lot of Crute. I saw earlier that my enemies were using grenades, and also that the composition that they were going for didn't require me more growth. If they had a second squad of assault marines, I would have gotten a squad of 2 recruit to deal with them, but with only 1 squad of assault marines, as you can see, it's unnecessary. Assault marines get killed, and the Crude Shapers can deal with attacks and whatever else. Furthermore, as you can see, they went for Dark Angel, so if I went for a lot of Crude, the ability on the bikes to just AoE around would have made it very difficult to deal with. So, more Breachers. Crude Shapers are trying to deal with the commander, but I probably overextended a little bit. Yeah. So time to back off. Time to get the Crude Shapers back since they died. Getting all the upgrades. So yeah. And in a little bit is when you'll see the actual Crude Center being used more and Crude Shapers being used more. For now, this army is relatively standard. In Tier 1, unless your opponent has a lot of infantry, melee infantry that you have to deal with your own melee, you do want to go for mostly Fire Warriors. Getting a lot of Crude can be a nice strategy. It's very micro intensive. You can get Crude and Crude Hounds and play that way, but it's very micro intensive, and all of these build orders are meant to be beginner friendly. So going for that kind of strategy is not beginner friendly. This is much easier. You can get them, but yeah, this is an easier army to execute with, to fight with. Yeah, Stalker AA, that deals way too much infantry damage and is gonna get nerfed next patch. It destroyed half of my army. Jesus, that thing was insane. Anyway, so now that army is dead, let's transition into the Kauyon army that we want outside of Tier 1. So we're going Tier 2. Getting second HQ. This second HQ is a lot later than you would get it in the Monka build order, and that's because you don't need power nearly as much as you do in Monka. So you get some infantry upgrades. And there we go. Now we start. Crude Narlak Arfar, Vespids. Another thing to note is if you're going for Kauyon, you can justify spending your power on vehicles rather than battlesuits. Hence, I'm going for the vehicle bay and Skyray gunships rather than the drones, rather than the guidance beacon and the drones. So we also got some Crude Hawks as well, since we're in Tier 2. And as you can see, the trick with this army is that you have your Crude Hawks and Vespids and Narlak, whatever else in the front lines, and then you have the gunships in the back lines, shelling everything. The beauty of this is that because you have melee units, you can target those melee units onto their anti-vehicle, which means that your gunships will not die and can slowly deal with anything else. Sure, they don't do a lot of damage, but they will eventually kill everything, and if you're able to deal with the melee, then with the anti-vehicle, then it doesn't really matter. So, yeah. And that's basically it for that. At this point, you could go into Tier 3 and get the Narlak, and those are very good as well, but at this point the game is over, so there isn't a point yet. There we go. You see, I start training Narlak. And yeah, that's it for this build order. It's not all that different for the other one, and that's just due to how Tau is in tier 1, where I would not recommend going for a lot of Crute in tier 1 just because you need to constantly reinforce them and you will be hemorrhaging requisition a lot. There are some situations where you do need them, but in general you do want to transition into a few Crute to tank and still a ranged army in tier 1, and then something like this in tier 2, where you have vehicles now become your main source of damage because of stuff like the Skyray gunship and the other vehicles that you're able to get later on when you go Monka tier 2. And then Gnarl Crutox, Vespids, and Gnarloks in order to tank for the vehicles. So hopefully this was useful, and see you guys in the next one.